morning. Thanks, Annalisa. As Annalisa outlined, I've been working with CAMS for quite some time, and I'm quite excited to have the opportunity to talk to you this morning, so thank you for your attention. So, what if we could immediately move our resources to the local government service mix that provides the most value for our community based on need at any point in time? So what does that look like? It's an interesting thought to consider what optimum service delivery looks like for the community. How do we know that we're actually delivering the best service mix that we can? And we're doing it in the best way. First technical issue of the day. Didn't take long. So think about that. Think about how do we know we're delivering the best mix of services for our community, and we're doing it in the best way we can. So, in my old hometown, it's a little place, some of you might know it. It's where I grew up. My parents have lived in Wales for 35 years. My dad works at Arian. And this is the city's major employer. It has a strong possibility of closure in the next little while. It employs indirectly 6,000 jobs in a town of 23,000 people. You guys will all get what that means, I suppose, from a local government perspective. What does that mean to the services they deliver? What does it mean in the future? So you've got an infrastructure base originally designed for 60,000 people. You've got 23,000 people there, and potentially in the next few years, what will be there? So what's the right service mix for a town like Whyalla or a city like Whyalla at the moment? What's the right mix of services that the local government should be providing? You know, do you keep just doing what you're doing? Do you stop? Do you cut all of your infrastructure services? Do you shift your focus onto advocacy, onto economic development, onto community events? I don't have the answer for that one, and I'm not going to pretend to have the answer for that one. But locally, on the other hand, it's a different story. If you look at a council like Camden, it's got its fastest growing local government area in this state, apparently, according to them on their website. And it's set to grow to over 300,000 people in the next 25 years. So, what an amazing challenge for the people there working at Camden. What a unique opportunity for local government. And again, what sort of services should we be delivering? Where's the focus for a city like Camden? You know, is there focus on the here and now, or is it on the next 30 years? Whereabouts is there effort? Who do they employ? All of these questions. So, really fundamentally, I guess what I'm trying to get at is, are we doing the right things? Ascertaining and understanding the results achieved from the programs that we're providing. So are we doing what's the right things for our community? And I guess the other key thing, which I'll talk a little bit more about later, is, are we doing things right? And I think a lot of the conversation today is probably going to be focused more on, are we doing things right? But it's also important to know, to think about, are we doing the right things? So, first and foremost, are we doing things right? What's the service mix look like for an organisation? We've been giving this a lot of thought at CAMS around how do we assess and how do we think about services and what's the right mix of services for us to deliver. So there's a little bit of research around portfolio management and how we actually manage our services through the portfolio lens. And obviously this is something that, certainly is not new. Most of you will understand if you're a portfolio from a financial perspective or from an insurance company or from a stockbroker's portfolio. That what we're fundamentally trying to do with portfolio management is maximise the value of what we're actually trying to achieve. We're trying to provide a balance or a risk management approach through portfolio management, and we're trying to align fundamentally with the strategies and the strategic objectives of our organisation. So when we're looking at are we doing the right things, we can borrow a little bit around what's already been done, I suppose, in these fields of portfolio management. So just a few little concepts I wanted to just talk through quickly with you, just around the ability to look at different ways of prioritising and different ways of looking at the service mix that we're delivering and what we should be doing. And this is sort of a pretty simple sort of conceptual piece, but it's based around, I guess, that whole product portfolio management work from a lot of management consulting companies and a lot of management theory over the years around where are we actually best to focus our efforts and our energy. And if we look at categorising the services into something simple like this, it gives us a little bit of an interesting perspective around what it is that we can do well, where is the need in this example. So it's just a concept around portfolio management. So this basic piece has been, of course, taken to the nth degree by some organisations, and I borrowed this one from one of our clients. So, but basically, this is what you're seeing here on this particular portfolio analysis is a combination of the trying to understand a lot more around what the actual need for certain services are, where do we see high importance, where do we see low importance, what is the cost of some of these services. So I guess giving us some perspective all around the different services. I think everyone can see those dots, by the way, are just individual services. You can't pick that up. But, so what we can see is there's a very interesting outlier up here. It's costing a fair bit of money. That's probably a swimming pool, I guess. Not too sure, but swimming pool, leisure centre, something like that. And then obviously some on the other spectrum, things that are contributing to revenue, maybe a car park or something. So this is all just about this prioritisation portfolio, looking at what services we're delivering at a very high level at this point. So then, I guess, for many of you, and certainly for me, I find that that's good. That gives us sort of a conceptual feel for where our services are sitting in the portfolio mix that we have. But then how do we take that down to another degree and actually really delve down into what the assessment criteria of the individual services are? How do we rank services? How do we rank their importance? How do we understand the costs associated with it? And this is just part of an overall portfolio sort of assessment. I'm sorry about the size of the font there for the visually challenged, but that's quite small. What that's basically trying to do is show you that basically a service audit, obviously this goes right down. I think there's about 85 different services in this model that we developed. There's an operating income component, operating expense, net service cost, and then over here, and it keeps going, I couldn't fit the whole thing on the page, but what we're trying to do there is really talk about different mechanisms to rank and sort and look at our service portfolio mix by basically using, in some areas, linkages to council plan, linkages to our strategic direction, trying to understand what the community benefit of certain services are, trying to understand more about our risk profile for these services. So all of these different aspects obviously are things that we, this is I guess a more practical example of going through and prioritising the services and then using that information to make decisions around how we mix our services, where we invest, what we should focus on as well when we get to the next part about actually trying to identify where we need to focus in terms of our service reviews and delivering more value. Where are we going to get the best return from that effort as well? So the fundamental, from service prioritisation, the other piece that I wanted to talk about was a little bit around our capacity to deliver services and really why the service portfolio and the service mix is really important when we're looking at how we can deliver value to the community. So if you look at something like this, what you've got, this is trying to explain a whole range of different things in one piece. Is really, here are mandatory services, the key things that we're responsible to deliver, legislative responsibilities must do, preferred services, this is things that we should be doing arguably, and discretionary services. So this is, I guess, a visualisation of our capacity to deliver services to the community and what we can actually do and what we can actually deliver. And what you'll see there that fundamentally on a strategic level, we're always making decisions about what services we do and what services we aren't going to do. Are we going to be involved in childcare? Do we need to be involved in caravan parks and tourism? What services are we actually going to be delivering? As local government professionals, they're always having this conversation, no doubt, with the elected officials around, what business are we in and what services should we be delivering, and then how much. I guess over time, one of the challenges in New South Wales and introducing rate capping in Victoria as well, and also with communities that perhaps their rate base, the taxation base is dropping, is a lot of organisations are finding themselves in this sort of situation here where we're basically over time, if we're continuing to run business as usual, we're actually going to slowly decline in our capability to deliver services effectively to the community. So that's, obviously a real concern, a real challenge for organisations in that situation. I don't think Camden's got this problem, but certainly a lot of the organisations in regional Australia, and also obviously where there's significant rate capping challenges. Clearly, when we're getting into the topic of service reviews and when we're getting into improvement initiatives, this is what we're trying to achieve. It's obviously trying to manage, rather than continuing to go down and reduce our capacity, what can we do to increase the productivity of our organisations and deliver better value and keep that value high? So, which leads me on to the next point. Are we doing things right? So, I've talked a lot about, are we doing the right things? Are we actually delivering the services that we need to deliver to communities? Have we got the right mix? Have we got the right investment across the board? But then, are we doing them in the right way? So, can we increase the value of what we're providing by doing things differently? I think, talking to a few people earlier this morning, I think there's a fair few of you that would say there's a fair bit of room to move there and doing things slightly better. How you actually get there, I guess, is the fundamental question. So, why are we undertaking service reviews? Why have we got 92 people here today? Fantastic turnout. Why are we doing it? I'm sure it's not for this reason, just because the New South Wales government says that we really should be doing it, or in the case of merged councils now, merged councils are having to have their service reviews, I think, ready by, have to have a service listing and a framework ready by September and completed by September 2017. Service reviews across every service that they're delivering. So, obviously there's a need to undertake service reviews, but and it's being enforced upon us, I guess, by other states. But the real reason we're obviously undertaking, the real reason we're here is to make sure that we're delivering better value to the community and delivering better outputs. Clearly, for those of you, some of you might be new to the service review and quality management sort of concepts. Others know a lot more than I do about it. But fundamentally, I guess, when we're looking at service reviews, there's a lot of thinking that's gone behind. These things haven't obviously just come out of, the concept hasn't just come out of thin air. Wasn't dreamt up by anyone here, but really it's an aggregation. The way we see the service reviews is it's trying to take some of the best aspects of each of these different frameworks and different theories and different approaches and leveraging those into our thinking when we're actually undertaking these service reviews. So, you know, certain theories and practices are obviously better ingrained in different areas, and this is not comprehensive by any stretch, but you know, when we're thinking about undertaking service reviews and running them through organisations, there's a lot of great theory and practice out there that you can use and adapt into your own framework and methodology. So one of the questions that, or one of the things that I always think about around service reviews is how often should we do them as well? So yes, there's a need to do them. Why do we need to do them? How often do we need to do them? Well, there's obviously a range of different opportunities there for people in terms of the frequency and so forth. But this quote was interesting. It's not a local government one, it's from the UK, but you know, service reviews are required wherever a change is needed in population, a change in population needs or a change in resources. And then I think about, you know, the modern world where we have these population needs and population changes on a seemingly constant basis. We have this changing societal norms, we have changing service demands, we have changing technology on a day-to-day basis. So how often do we do service reviews? You know, to me it seems that this is something that we're going to be probably trying to embed in our organisations and make just a core part of business, because, you know, the way we deliver services and what's required is going to change, you know, increasingly rapidly. So there's obviously a strong need for service reviews. It obviously comes from there's a whole range of frameworks and different approaches to service reviews. If we look at our approach and what we've done is we've tried to build up an approach to service review and methodology which is based on, I guess, practicality. It's based on the fundamental theoretical constructs, but really what we've tried to do with our approach, and this doesn't need to be your approach, but what we've tried to do is build in a bit of practicality, and there's a few key considerations, and I'll outline each of those steps for you. Really, one of the things that we've found is that the service review process really needs to be able to be built into the fundamental capability of your organisation. So, and it also needs to really involve people and really leverage their enthusiasm and leverage their capabilities that you have. So we haven't tried to make what we're doing particularly try not to make it overly sophisticated or overly difficult to understand. It's something that people can engage with and something that makes sense to people. So our fundamental approach and the work that we've done is really around defining the service, obviously, and you can have lots of different arguments around how to define a service and how deep you go and how high you want to go and how wide you want to go. But fundamentally, defining the service, really trying to capture what it is that we do on a day-to-day basis, what are the outputs, why, what does it link to in terms of our strategic objectives, what does it link to in terms of our strategic or community planning, how's it done? And I think, you know, this stage is really interesting, in my experience anyway. It's been really interesting trying to understand from people how they actually do things, what is the current approach to the way they do things, really trying to understand what it is about the service. In many cases, if I'm facilitating, it's a learning experience, obviously. But really, and I've got a couple of interesting stories as I go through this I'll talk to you about, but defining the service and then really analysing the current environment. And you can do this in a whole range of different ways. Well, obviously, there's a whole range of external knowledge out there around service delivery. So if you're analysing the current environment, there's specific experts in the field, there's market research that you can do, but there's also just talking to the people and workshopping with people what is it that they're actually experiencing in the current environment. Is it changes in regulation? Are there changes in standards? Are there major changes in the way people are going about it? Are there changes in demand? And obviously there's a wealth of knowledge and understanding that you can capture through that current environment analysis. Then really the next phase that we undertake is really reviewing the different alternative ways. So this is what we do now, this is what we could do, basically. That often involves a whole heap of process mapping and process engineering and looking at what the processes are. So there's also a strategic level of that about looking at the different service delivery options. So we did a big study out in the outback in Western Australia for the West Australian government around how they can change service delivery models in remote Indigenous communities. And when you look at something like that, it's really interesting because you've got mining contractors delivering services that can deliver them in, you've got local government, you've got Indigenous organisations, you've got other healthcare providers, you've got not-for-profits. Who's best positioned to deliver some of these services? So there's alternatives in terms of those sorts of options, but then fundamentally there's alternatives in terms of what standard do we deliver the service at? Do we do the minimum standard required by legislation? Do we try to deliver services at a standard that are actually required by the community? There's obviously a range of different thought processes around that as well. So the other piece that we try to look at when we're reviewing alternatives is also trying to get an understanding of some of the performance measurement, KPIs, and those aspects of the service as well. Benchmarking potentially across, that's obviously, part of the analysis survey. There's not a huge amount of information on benchmarking, but that's a core piece as well as looking at different ways that other organisations are actually undertaking the service. So these are just some aspects of the methodology. Implementation planning. So out of each of these stages, and one of the things that we have been able to do quite well, I think, is try and draw out what are some of the key implementation initiatives that we can undertake when we're delivering a service. Is it looking at different assets? Do we need to re-look at our assets? Are our leisure facilities completely outdated? Do we really need to look at a whole different model of service delivery around that? If we're running accounts payable or accounts receivable, do we need to change the system? Do we need to introduce new technology? What do we need to do to take the service to a new level? Capturing those implementation plans and implementation initiatives, and then looking at what the new performance criteria are going to be as well. So looking at different performance measures, looking at different scorecarding approaches and so forth. And then one of the big things is then actually the execution part of all of this, and I'm sure people that have undertaken service reviews or are undertaking service reviews at the moment, this is probably quite a challenging area, is that how do we actually execute on the ideas and the initiatives? How do we, one, prioritise the initiatives and the ideas that are coming out of the service review? How do we get them approved? How do we get them actioned? And then how do we make sure that whilst they've been approved and actioned, they actually got done? And did they have any impact on the fundamental outcomes that we were trying to achieve in the first place? So, and then it's in a circle because, as I sort of alluded to before, we sort of see this as something that's an ongoing process, that's something that we're undertaking continuously, I guess hence continuous improvement. But this process is an ongoing thing, and the information that we're seeing from what we've done and what we've changed, is it impacting on our performance metrics, and then what is that telling us? So that's a little bit about an approach from our point of view. Some of the key challenges that we've faced, key issues we've come across, I guess collectively across whether it's Australia, New Zealand, Canada, UK. Process mapping. This is a pretty easy area to get lost in and spend an inordinate amount of time doing is process mapping and process mapping and process mapping. Got to remember what are we doing the process mapping for, and where are we going to get the most value out of it. So yes, there's an element of making sure that we've got processes documented to make sure that people are actually following the process and that people understand the process. But what is it for? So I mean, clearly. And one of the key ways we've always used it is to try and document the costs associated with the process to help justify the improvement initiatives and build the business case around the improvement initiatives that you want to undertake. So if you're wanting to invest $500,000 in a new ERP system, well, you can justify it. Or if you want electronic timesheets, or these are the cost savings that you're going to get, and you've got the evidence there to support it. This is a real challenge for organisations, is sort of undertaking the service reviews, and somebody's driving that whole process, and then a couple of years later, well, what happened to all that documentation that Fred had, and where's it all gone, and what drives it on, and do they put it on the document management system? No. So this is a real challenge for organisations, is trying to manage the different tool sets across the board that they're using for the process, managing the work that they've done. Touched on this before, just a little bit about staff engagement. I mean, this is a really challenging area, and I think somebody mentioned it to me earlier, there's obviously a fear factor for staff. Staff, I think, are probably the best people to be involved, have the most ideas, I generally find, want to contribute, want to get problems solved, want to deliver better value. But there is also this concept of fear, which makes it difficult to engage with some staff. You know, particularly I imagine it's going to be a similar merger process, that when we're starting to engage with people, they're obviously going to have some pretty significant concerns about their future employment and where they sit in the organisation and so forth. So trying to really understand, trying to get input from staff and engagement in the process is critically important, not just for the ideas and the improvement, but obviously the execution phase of this as well. So not embedded in standard practice and organisational culture, really important that we engage and keep this as part of business. You know, this is not business as usual, but maybe it should be business as usual. I mean, you might have to put an extra service profile for just continuous improvement. I think that probably makes sense. And if we're espousing that, we'll have to keep looking at how we're improving our continuous improvement service as well. So, which methodology. So we're lucky enough to have a black belt, not karate or anything like that, but it's a Lean Six Sigma black belt in our organisation. We're very fastidious about everything. But I think one of the things, particularly linking back to staff engagement, is you're really going to be careful about how detailed you go. And, you know, it's important to build capacity, it's important to communicate concepts, but I think it's really important too to keep it simple for people as well. Really important to keep it simple, otherwise you lose the staff engagement. Why aren't you guys giving me this sort of I'm going to get feedback for the next one. One of the challenges is these processes can be heavily reliant on one person. So it's really important, obviously, that there's broader support. You know, one person is not going to be particularly successful if they're trying to do it on their own, but everyone's getting in the way. They're not being supported by the executive team, they're not being supported by the decisions, both explicitly and implicitly, I would say. Monitoring progress, we talked about that. Doing the right things, I spent a lot of time talking about that. And then continuity. So this is, I think, really an important one as well. It's working through those service reviews, obviously within the resource constraints that we have, but how do we actually make sure that we've got those findings and then we're tracking those findings and then we're feeding them back into the learnings for the next round of service reviews and keeping that process moving. So that's just a few points on our thoughts. Thought I'd give you a little, got a few minutes left, I think. Just wanted to just touch on one. I just came back from 2.5 years in Vancouver, which was lovely. Beautiful part of the world. If you haven't been there, it's highly recommended. It's a bit wet, but New South Wales has been a bit wet lately too. But this is just this is my first Canadian job, so I was happy with this. It's only a small community and a small council. It's just on, it's about halfway to Whistler. So one of the things that we did was we went in there and basically reviewed the financial management practices. So it was quite an interesting one because I was entering into a new culture, and even though it's very similar to Australia, it's actually some of the work practices and some of the work approaches and so forth weren't quite the same as here. So they had a lot of challenges around meeting their legislative requirements. They had a lot of challenges around customer satisfaction was really, really low. They were certainly looking for answers, particularly around things like their budgeting process, customer service, rate payments, and so forth. So went to Squamish. That's me there. I'm not the chief, by the way. That's the name of the mountain. It's not the guy in front. So this is Squamish. But what we did was we basically looked at all of the different processes. We looked at opportunities, and it was really a great exercise in working with the staff there. There were some major areas where we identified some potential improvements and potential savings around their processes. And I think this is sort of where you're looking at, or when you're looking back to process mapping and things like that. This is a fairly convincing case to go back and say to the elected officials and the executive, look, if we can make some significant changes here in the way we approach our work and what we do and so forth, we can really make some major changes in overall resourcing across the board. Now these are fairly significant. Obviously there's a few assumptions in there. But this is where we're starting to build a really strong business case around making change. And just through the work that we did around the process for engineering, they had some pretty awful manual processes and bad systems. And I don't think they'd actually heard of electronic banking yet. So there was plenty of scope. So it wasn't like we were particularly, this was like when they're trying to pay their council rates and then it was unfair, but that was still happening on the first of the year. People went up at the front to pay their rates manually, so forth. So there was some easy pickings from a consultancy perspective. So just I just want to finish up with a couple of tips. One of the things, this I actually learned out of Vancouver as well. We had a good process in place at the City of Richmond in BC as well, is just around service review and service improvement. So what they'd set up is a committee structure. It was chaired by the general manager, but the committee structure included elected members. There's a lot of pressure on about rising staff numbers and the quality of service delivery. And so part of the service review process that they set up was to capture the service initiatives. They would be ranked and approved by the manager, then put up to the general manager for comment, and then either endorsed or not by the subcommittee and council, and then approved and fed back down for action. So there's two things that sort of being captured there: capturing and improving initiatives, and then also making sure we've got some good governance processes in place. And I think that also showed quite a high level of commitment to the process by having those elected members on board, and it was probably pretty smart to see that they were making progress around that. This is something from the UTS report, communicating results and tracking results. So clearly the work that you're doing around continuous improvement, this is quite a good graph from Paul Stevens, where they're basically tracking the individual services and the benefits, or the anticipated benefits and value that they're getting over time and what that's accumulating to, so that they can communicate back to stakeholders the benefits of undertaking the service review process right across the board. One of the other key things that we picked up is that there's IPNR integrated planning and performance and service review are not sort of necessarily, whilst there's some discrete capability there, there's also a really important need to integrate the two. And I think when you're looking at your service review process and your service framework and your service policies that you're undertaking, how do you link that into your integrated planning framework? How do you make sure that you, because there's a huge amount of synergies there between the two, obviously, around performance measures, around reporting, around building in improvement initiatives into your operational plans and business plans. So there's a great capability there, and obviously the fundamental reason a lot of the services are being delivered in the first place is to actually achieve outcomes in the community strategically. Anyway. I've kind of, I don't know if you guys have had this experience, but this happens a little bit more often when you're actually trying to redesign a process. But it's really important when you're going through a documenting process. I've touched on it before. It is important to actually make sure you do capture the full process. Try and understand. Whilst you don't want to be process mapping for process mapping sake, make sure you do capture enough detail in there so that you can actually make some decisions around process changes as well. And then measurement. So this is, from I guess our point of view, a really critical part about looking at how you actually track and monitor services on an ongoing basis. There's a fine. Straight away. And you'll see there just a technical thing just around the differentiation there between outputs and outcomes and how we're actually tracking both. So what are the outcome type level performance measures that we're actually tracking around the services versus what are the efficiency and effectiveness measures that we're tracking. So I think it's really important when you're working through your service review processes that you make sure that you have a look. They obviously help to both inform your decision making and also track how well you're going at the time. And we've got a little toy, we've got a little thing that John is going to show you just to visualise what does that look like from a service performance perspective. This is something we're doing in the UK with one of the large clinical commissioning groups, but just to visualise a little bit around what you can deliver from service monitoring. I get my assistant to click through. There you go. Excellent. So if you picture this, I suppose, as a elective care or whatever service that you're looking at, there's some interesting key points there around what are the dollars associated with delivering the service. So this is giving us an indication of whether this service delivery is on track or off track in terms of financial performance. Just want to go back. So quality, obviously that's a big topic in the health sector as well. What are the indicators that are letting us know that our quality is at the standard that we need it to be at? Obviously we've got that, different indicators there. Specific performance measurement, there's probably a little bit of overlap between the quality piece and the performance measures here, but what are those performance metrics that tell us on an ongoing basis whether this service is performing to the level that we expect? And then if it's not, well, what does that tell us, or what do we need to do? Is it just an increase in demand? Is it an increase in, is it just a little bit slack? What's the issue? And then progress against plan. I think this is really important, though, is feeding off a lot of the points that I've been making around just making sure you monitor the execution of the activities and so forth around your service review and service improvement process. So that's just a quick snapshot of what we're talking about in terms of performance monitoring and performance evaluation. So just to finish up, really, the whole point of this whole service review process is that doing what we've always done is not an option. The world's changing every day. We see that our community demands are changing every day, expectations change every day. What we've always done is not an option. We need to be constantly challenging how we maximise the value of what we're delivering. So constantly challenging and building that into our organisational cultures, I think can only benefit the public sector and only benefit local government. And we do need to get a bit better at executing, monitoring and tracking how we're going on an ongoing basis. So this is a constant sort of mechanism of feeding back, feeding information up to management and executive and governance around how we're going in terms of our portfolio mix and what we may or may not need to do. So on that note, thank you very much for your time today, guys. It's really appreciated, and hope you were able to get a couple of key sort of points out of that or get some value. I've got some questions. Anyone wants to ask me about the scheme?
Hi. Just Ross Kingsley from Blacktown Council. Just a comment, I guess. I think you showed in your Canadian example the decision making and government sort of detail on that slide of who was assessing the relative value, signing off on some of the decisions and getting council approval and so on. So you showed exactly what my comment was going to be. But looking at the methodology slide, that was probably to me the elephant in the room. There was talking about assessing the alternatives, but then planning the implementation. There's a huge part in between about making those choices and getting those choices approved, which in local government land, and certainly for us at the moment, there's an enormous load on the service review program, how we actually get better and slicker at doing that.
Yeah.
Which I suppose relates to some of the things you're also showing about providing the evidence in a visual way so that people can engage with it. But I think it's a dimension which is often left off the methodology charts, as it were, of just that governance approval.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's a really, I think in my experience, I've always done a lot of consultancy reports and said, well, here's my nice report, it doesn't look great, and then sort of like, oh, the next organisation and say, well, assume that's all I've done. But that whole process of engaging, and I've seen a couple of good examples around where people are building that into a process improvement framework and linking it to some of those improvement initiatives are pretty easy to sign off. Like it's $1,000 or it's just change this policy easy. Other, when you get into some of the bigger services as well, like actually putting there needs to be probably a fair bit clear around those improvement initiatives and building business cases and project objectives around those. So often some of those big ones also might need to be, I guess, where we're sort of leaning towards at the moment is incorporating those into the broader decision-making plans around our project approvals, new operating project approvals, capital approvals as well, because there's a lot of decisions, there's big decisions around swimming pools, big decisions around leisure centres, they're not really tick the box sort of improvement, so it's dealing with a different scale, and it's quite interesting. Right, so that's one.
Yeah, hi, Daniel Adler from Waverley Council. Just a question about the one of the early slides about measuring financial risk and several other categories. It seemed that the quantitative measures were clearly identified. Local council does a lot of qualitative-based work. How can those measures be incorporated into those graphs?
Yeah, so I guess there's a different around qualitative information. It's always. Are you sort of talking about the one where I had the services and the assessment piece? Yeah. So, I mean, that one was fundamentally a subjective. A lot of that was a very subjective sort of assessment process. There's, I guess, some different. When we're looking at the services, one of the biggest things is trying to, I guess, measure value. What is the value of this particular service? So it's incredibly difficult to do, but what we've seen organisations do, I suppose, is use a lot of the subjective components in those assessment models there. That is a subjective assessment. They also use a lot of the community surveying type information to feed into those surveys, to feed into that information as well around ranking priorities and so forth. So that was, I guess, a numerical representation of subjective data and qualitative data. And in terms of otherwise capturing in general feedback and other forms of data, that's obviously a challenging one that I guess a lot of survey use and other tools that you would traditionally use come into play. But I mean, there's still a huge amount of subjectivity in the decision-making process at the moment. I think in terms of prioritising these things, I don't think there's a huge amount of quantitative other than followers is easy.
Just as a follow-up to that then, which methodologies get used in that subjective ranking criteria in regard to portfolio management?
It's still an area where we're sort of doing a lot of work in terms of further investigation, but we've used a lot of just standard, very similar assessment models to what you find in pinball and for projects have been applied in the service level component. So if you look at the models that we're using, there's sort of some matrix type models and triple bottom line models, looking at social, economic and environmental components, governance, and feeding those into the service assessment process, risk management as well. So we've been borrowing a lot of information from the Prince 2 pinbox of project assessment and prioritisation approaches to try and apply that within a service context.
Hi, I'm Alec Kettle from the newly merged Inner West Council. Just wondering if you can tell us some councils that are actually doing service reviews well, and on top of that, maybe any other private sector organisations that might be doing it well as well.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, probably I'll get people that we'll probably find out from people today who thinks they're doing it well and so forth. I haven't got, a couple of examples in Canada where I saw, like the City of Richmond were doing their service review, I think doing it quite well. But in Australia, in the organisations, I guess we're working with Queen Powering and outside Canberra, they've got some interesting approach to service review, best value and so forth. They've got a lot of experience and dedicated resources around that at the moment. But I think there's, also in Victoria, I think Mooney Valley, one of our clients doing a lot of work around that service review, service prioritisation, Shepparton in Victoria. I'm sure everybody, there's a lot of really good examples of service reviews and organisations, but that'd be something I'd mention to you.
Just a quick one, mate. You had one of your slides, you were talking about mandatory services, preferred and discretionary. So obviously when I look at that, preferred and discretionary, how do you define the difference between the two of those?
Yeah. So I think that is, that's a really interesting point. And I mean, I haven't got a specific definition between the two, because I think, effectively they're all discretionary. You have the mandatory services, and then there is even a risk in that preferred tends to imply maybe things we're comfortable with a little bit, or maybe things that the business where we think we should be in. I'm not sure, how you categorise that. It's really would be interesting to see where different organisations think they should categorise their services, because I've seen a few examples that are similar, like core, non-core, commercial services, breaking them up that way. It's just that was just sort of a one dimension, but we didn't have any real specific definition other than say, I think it's more traditional